next to me I have Mr. Ferdinand Richard, who has been on his way here for almost 24 hours.
Almost, yes.
Almost.
Yes,
So
yes.
can we please welcome him with a round of applause? I met Mr. Ferdinand Richard the first time at Glasgow, the conference Regenerate Europe Through Music. Now I will read about you because it's so much, so this day has been too windy for me to remember it all.
For me as well. Okay. It's a good exercise.
Ferdinand Richard from Marseille is co-founder of La Friche, the La Belle-de-Mai, this beautiful place. Ferdinand is also the chairman of the Roberto Cimetta Fund and the founding director of AMI in Marseille. He's currently a member of the board of directors of the Cultural Policies Observatory in Grenoble, an expert of the Agenda 21 Culture Commission, which you heard about before in Maria's opening speech, of the Cities and Local Governments United Network, and an expert for UNESCO. I think that requires another round of applause.
Keep some for the end, because
So, Ferdinand, thank you very much for joining us here today at the Urban Research Day in Malmö. I give the floor to you, and once again, please don't be afraid to interact and raise your hand during the session so that we can have an integrative talk.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I thank you. So, hello. I've been flying, really flying. I mean, it was like being on a leaf. And finally, by some miracle, the leaf went on Kastrup Airport. So I'm here, I'm glad. I'm very happy that I'll be on time for the final party. That's also a good point. I would have been desperate arriving later than the final party, but it's not the case. I'm a lucky guy. Yes, I am not an academic, so you can interrupt me anytime. If you have questions, but the problem is that I don't see you very well because of these slides, so if you see someone that is timidly raising the hands, you have to tell me. All right, so it's my second time, not my second time, but my second time in recent times in Malmö, which is really interesting for a Marseille guy like me, because I think what I'm going to talk about concerning the city of Marseille will certainly be quite familiar to you, because I think Malmö and Marseille have some interesting common points. Let's start with Marseille. Marseille is 2,600 years old. It's a very old place in France. The paradox being that it has, I have the feeling it has very slight memories of what happens in the preceding century. They just, because people get in and get out, and it looks like there is no major dominant families that are here since centuries. You don't feel them anyway. They just hide behind the curtain. So it's like, it's a city of newcomers. Everybody's a newcomer. So the city is very old, and it's very fresh and new at the same time. Fresh, I'm not sure if it's a good term. But anyway, it's something strange. Marseille was rich because it's the first harbor in France, and it was the door to the colonies, and all the goods from the colonies and to the colonies would transit by this city. The golden age in recent time was just after the Second World War, because all the Atlantic harbors in France had been destroyed by bombs and things like that, and industry was completely over there. And so the reconstruction of France, goods coming from the colonies, especially, Marshall Plan stuff, arrived mostly in Marseille. And I am living in the poor suburbs of Marseille, on the North District, just over the harbor. And my neighbor, an old guy, said that at that time, in the late 40s, early 50s, boats could wait like 2 weeks in the bay because they could not they could not find a place in the harbor. It was so busy and so crowded with boats and goods and everything. It was really like, 120% full speed. And almost no unemployment, and everybody's having a job. I mean, it was really working. And then the city received, I would say, 3 very violent uppercuts, one after each other. The first one was the independence of Algeria. Of course, I'm not going to discuss about that. The only thing is that we had in Algeria over 2 million French citizens that were there since 3-4 generations, and that used to be the poor peasants and farmers of France, jobless, that had been sent to North Africa to start small farms and things like that. And these people were poor. Most of the people who came back from Algeria were poor people. They came eventually with 1 suitcase and nothing, no money. Only a very few rich families there. And these people were very traumatized because they had been completely involved with the local population over there. You see, there were many Jewish families, but from the Sepharad thing, which has not very much to see with the ultra-right parties of Israel, which are in Israel today. And these people were living like the Arabs. Actually, they are very much like the Arabs, except the religion. But the food, the music, the dance, everything is, they were very much together. And then in late 50s, early 60s, 61, 62, we had a massive coming of these people. 1.5 million arrived in Marseille in less than 1 year. Of course, they didn't all of them stay in Marseille, but quite a few stayed. And with no money, no job, no nothing. And the city and the government had to hurry up to build this very fast-built blocks to, host these people. They were done, urbanism was kind of strange. I mean, it was just emergency, do that stuff. And they were supposed to be for just a few decades, not more, but they are still there, and there are some of them in very bad conditions. And of course, this is where we have the biggest troubles and difficulties. And when you visit these blocks, which I do every now and then because I'm also in politics and I need to meet these people, so I go in these blocks and I'm always so shocked by the very, very appalling quality of life there. It's still the problem. We have some bars, some blocks there, which have the biggest unemployment rate in France. In some cities, in some blocks, you can have up to 70%. 70% unemployment. You meet families, because I'm also dealing with this center in the music, and I am hosting all these hip-hop groups and things like that. You have some of these youngsters, the last one they saw in the family to go to work was the grandfather. So they are absolutely disconnected with timetable, with jobs, with CVs. They're just completely lost out of that, and it becomes a vicious circle. And it's very difficult, except through this kind of cultural approach, to reconnect them with reality. So that was the first shock. Second shock came economically because France get rid of its colonies. The independences in Africa, for example, were almost 61, 62, 63. And Marseille, who was the interface between the colony and France, lost its predominant economic position. And that was the second shock because they lost a lot of contracts. And actually, it was also the beginning of the problems with this place, because this place was the biggest tobacco factory in France. There was 3,500 workers there. And they were providing the Gauloise and the Gitane to all the colonies and to all the rest of France. Once the colony stopped, the market of these cigarettes became smaller and smaller, and it was a part of the problem. And the third shock, of course, was the petroleum shock in '72 that we all received in Europe, but of course places which were already fragilized could not resist as well as other ones. And then there was a fourth problem, which was the delay they took in setting up what we call the urban community. Big cities in France like Bordeaux, Lyon, Toulouse, Lille started their urban communities in the late 60s, beginning of the 70s for some of them. And because of political reasons, the Lord Mayor of that time didn't want to create a urban community because he would have lost the power and the majority would have changed because we would have to put together Marseille and all the small cities around it. But then, politically speaking, it would have switched from the left to the right. So he decided to stop the process or to slow the process. Of course, we had to do the urban community, but we did it probably 10 to 15 years later, if you compare with Lyon and Bordeaux and all these places. And when you talk about urban community, of course, you talk about mutualizing means, money, power, and things like that. So all this together made the situation that at the end of the early 70s, middle of the 70s, the city was in a really bad shape. It is said that the city lost between 10,000 to 20,000 inhabitants every year between 1972 to 1992. So you can make the calculation. This is between 200,000 to 400,000 inhabitants that left the place. So it's just a pure economical and social tragedy. And at that time, I was a musician. I was touring with my group all around the place over there, but not in Marseille, because Marseille was the black hole. Nothing would happen there. And there were plenty of these factories that were closed, and nobody really knew what to do with this. This place was closed. Well, it took some time, but the last workers left the place in 1986 after several years of hard fight with the police because they didn't want to leave the place. But of course, economically, they had to do. And we started the activity, the cultural activity there in 1992, so to say 6 years after. And the people living in the area were just furious because they had been fighting to keep the place. They've been kicked out by the police, and then they see all these kind of Zulu people coming in with, red hair and things like that, and getting the place for free, and they just could not understand it. And it begins now, 20 years later, we begin to have a dialogue and a constriction with these people. Of course, the people of this district left for the most fortunate of them. Who stayed are the old people, the pensioners, the little pensioners that used to be workers in the factory because they couldn't find a way to go away. And La Belle-de-Mai, which is the name of the district, this is why we call it La Friche de la Belle-de-Mai, is one of the most deprived area in Marseille. So exactly this is what happened until the early 90s. This initiative is not a squat. It is an initiative from the City Hall. The City Hall, the new Lord Mayor in the early 90s left, had a very interesting politician in charge of culture. He was himself an artist. He is still living, actually, he's still an artist. And they had no money because, of course, because of this social and economical tragedy, the people who stayed in Marseille were the people who cannot afford paying tax. We have the highest rate of exempted people for tax paying in France, we have 43% of the population who is not paying tax because they are considered too poor to pay tax, which means that the city has in its bank, in its cash, has no mean to develop the place, and especially in the 90s. So for this guy in charge of culture, with almost no budget, he was looking for ideas, and one of the ideas was to use one of these abandoned former industrial places to put some artists in there and look what will happen. And this is what they did. Of course, today they would not make it because today it would be much too expensive, and promoters would take the place to build offices and things like that, a bit like it is around here. But at that time, no one would buy this place because the city tried to sell, not the city, the tobacco company, which at that time in France was a governmental business. It was no private company. They tried desperately to find someone, some industrial, some entrepreneur that would take this place again, and they never found it for most 3-4 years. They couldn't find anyone. Because it is in the center of the city, it is surrounded by small streets. It is difficult to drive big trucks there. And they all said, when we saw the director, she was a woman, Madame Benassayag, of the tobacco company, public company, she said that the possible buyers would not be interested because it was too expensive to refurbish and to reorganize for another activity. And it was cheaper to create a new, completely new building in the outskirts of Marseille than to restart with this thing. And this is not the only place in Marseille like that. So there were several places empty. And so this guy in charge of culture went to see this lady with a couple of artists and cultural activists, including myself, and say, what about letting this place to artists for 2 years on a short-term contract just to try experiment things that you cannot experiment in normal theaters like this one, you know, like normal, usual spaces. And the lady said, yes, why not? Because at the same time, it will protect the place. Because, of course, all these places were, we say, vandalisés in French, I don't know. I mean, there were thieves coming in and taking the wires and the pipes and the tiles of the roof. I mean, it was like getting worse and worse. And so she said, yes, you have the place for a 2-year contract. Of course, as soon as we were inside, we understood one thing, that the dream was over. I mean, when you think it's very nice to be there because you just need to make a little bit of painting the wall, then you need, 50,000 euros of painting because it is so huge that you need a truck of painting. Same for the electricity, same for the heating. Okay, we are in the south, but in winter we can have, I know it's going to make you smile, but we can have sometimes -0. So, but in such a building, 19th century built building, -0, if you want to dance or if you want to paint, is a bit complicated, and the heating problem is a serious one. So we had all these problems coming in. Of course, no money to do that. But the idea was really to keep it as a day space, not a night consuming terminal for cultural goods or artistical goods, but a place where people would practice and build a factory where people would prepare productions and things like that. So we began to build up working spaces. As far as I'm concerned, with some friends, we built 6 rehearsal studios for musicians. It was immediately very successful because, of course, at that time, but I think it is still a little bit the problem, working spaces are the problem, because in France you can find venues to some extent. I will speak about that a bit later. But the working spaces are really a problem because either they are very expensive or too small, not adapted, or far from your residence. So this place was immediately understood as a working place and with working studios and everything. And it was immediately very successful. Yeah.
I would like. Hello?
Yep.
Yeah, I wonder, you said you build studios and workspaces. How was the size of these spaces?
They are, most of them 40 square meter. There is one which is big, 100 square meter. At that time, because we renewed them, but at that time there was even one 130 square meter, which was very interesting because it allowed musicians to work with theater people, dance people, and all these things. Yeah. Because before that, if you wanted to prepare a production, an artistic production with a dance group and music group, you had to use a small theater. But a small theater has a program. It is not made for that. You cannot just keep it for you like for 2 weeks or 3 weeks because they have to make shows and things like that. So you can use these theaters when they don't have a program, but it is difficult to have a regular base, organized schedule for rehearsal and creation. That was new at that time. No one, I mean, it was no other place in Marseille and even around Marseille for this kind of thing. So it was immediately successful. Of course, we decided to have a system that would allow as many people as possible to benefit from the place. For example, no one would have the studio like every Friday from 5 to 7 all year long. This does not exist. You would come to me or to my friends and say, I need the studio for this project. I prepare a tour, I prepare a recording, I prepare a show. I need a place for 3 weeks. And then you would have the place for 3 weeks. You will be alone there. You can be there, you have the key, you are home. But after 3 weeks, you have to go. Someone is coming in. And then we have already at the beginning at least 2 months, 3 months delay to find a place because it was so successful. It was opened, and it's still opened, almost 365 days a year, and the doors are closed between midnight to 6 o'clock in the morning. Beside that, you can do what you want there. And of course, it is very cheap because we want to keep it. It is not a business. It is a public initiative. We want to keep it like a public initiative. So almost all groups, all musicians, and more than musicians, of the area have been through these places in the last 20 years. The big names, the small names, everybody's been there. And for us, it's a fantastic point of observation because this is, through these spaces, you know what's going on, which trend is moving, which group is successful, whose group is going to die. I mean, you see all these things. And with the groups, you see the businessmen, you see their businessmen, how they organize themselves, etc., which makes that, of course, now we have an incubator for small cultural businesses. Most of these small cultural businesses are in link, of course, with the artists who are there. And it's really, it's producing, it's really interesting. So that was the idea, but we were there for 2 years just for experimenting things. And at the very second day after we were there, one of us said we have to find a powerful president that would protect us and drive the force in order to stay much over the 2 years, because of course our idea was to stay there until the end of times. So one had a brilliant idea, was to fetch Jean Nouvel, the famous architect. I thought he would never come. I mean, he was in Paris. We are 900 kilometers from Paris. He didn't know us. He's a very busy man. He's a huge entrepreneur with many, works everywhere in the world. But the guy came and he saw the place, he saw the people, and he said, okay, I am going to be the president of this. And that was a big chance because, of course, Jean Nouvel address book is amazing. And Jean really pushed very hard on the institutions and on the politicians, including the highest level of the state, to say what's happening there is really interesting. You cannot stop it. You have to find a solution. You know, that was very important from him, but it was also important for us because working with this guy, I had no clue at all of the interaction between art and urbanism. Because of Jean, we were four, more or less. Jean, and then Philippe Foulquier, the director. I was the vice director, the deputy director, and the secretary general, Fabrice Lextrait. And so we had direction meeting every week, almost. He was flying from Paris almost every week for direction meetings. So first, I found it very nice, very dedicating for such an important person. But I think intellectually speaking, he was very excited by the project. This is why he came. Because of course he made no money, he made no specific project there, just being the president of the place. And then he introduces us to this connection between urbanism and art and culture. I didn't know nothing about urbanism. I still do not know very much, but I got very excited from that point because I understood that art was not about presenting goods and consuming goods, and that art and culture and artists had a real responsibility in the local development, and especially in Marseille, and especially at that time. And he was the catalyst to put all this together and put us on the track and make us work. And then it became really exciting, and it's still very exciting. You wanted to ask something?
Yeah. I'm thinking, has he made money now, you think, out of this? You know, do you understand what I mean? Like, talking about his project, and do you think that it has been...
No, it was very clear since the beginning with Jean, because he said, I'm going to help you for a couple of years, but I'm not going to stay. And in 97, he said, okay, I quit. And then he always refused to participate to any form of debates or publications or things on La Friche Belle-de-Mai. For him, it was over. So we're still in contact with him, of course, because we became friends somehow. But he's not involved in this anymore, and he doesn't speak about it publicly, which I find quite relevant and respectful. So it's good like that. But really, I think if he was not there, the thing would be closed very fast, and nothing of this would have happened. And he was very much on this idea of making it open all day and having a connection between all kinds of activities there. So this image you have, this is the virtual vision of what is La Friche. The reality is the next image. I don't know, I don't want to explode that stuff.
Is it this one?
No.
That one?
No.
No.
That is the reality. See? So what you can see on this image is a picture of a third, I would say half of the system. The whole thing is 12 hectares, right? It's big. And you see a part of the second, because at that time it was all together. So you could drive with your car from the north to the south. And they had even some kind of bridges going over the regular streets, and you could drive from one point to the other. And the idea of Jean was to have everything intricated, like heritage organizations, multimedia startup, artist companies, all this mixed together on the 12 hectares. Because of money, when it came to the point that we want to keep on that place, we had to involve the city and several public institutions to buy the land from the tobacco company. It was too big for the city to do it. So they had to share the place in 3 blocks. Block 1 would be the heritage place, where you have the interregional workshop for the renovation of heritage goods. They renovate the pictures, they renovate the statues. It's interregional, so it's quite interesting because they are very high-profile technicians, and they use very avant-garde technologies to repair old books, to repair all this. So they are there. There are 150 workers there, top-level technicians. You have the INA, Institut National d'Audiovisuel. This is all the archives of the television and the cinema. And you have the reserves of the museums of Marseille, which is also very rich. And you have the opera workshops to build the decors. I don't know if you can understand that. Yeah? So this is part one. Part two is all this multimedia stuff. They film TV series. They have all kinds of multimedia startup private companies. And part three is what you see, is the artists, the Indians. So this part three, you have, So on the left, on the right side, where it is written La Friche, La Belle-de-Mai, it's, sorry? Okay. No. This is not my place. Yeah. Okay. On this building is the biggest building of the place. You can have huge manifestation, concerts, and things like that, up to 3,000, between 3,000 to 4,000 audience. But it is also our money pump, because we rent that space for any kind of symposium, meetings, general assemblies of anyone who is ready to rent it can have it. And actually, we use it also for our own activities. And last week, not later than last week, we had the 30th birth date of Transeuropal, which is this huge network of cultural place, European cultural place in former industrial buildings. We are a part of it. And the current president of this network is someone very near here. It's Birgitta Parsons. She's from Meieriet. Am I okay? In Lund. Yes. She was there with a large group of young Swedish people. But they were about 130 people from all over the place. And we organized some kind of joint platform during these 4 days with our friends from the Arab world, young activists, all these people having this new independent art space in the Arab world. This was really interesting. So we had the meeting there. Behind it, this kind of thing that is black and with a, this is new. This and this big block, white block here, are the two new things that were brought by Marseille 2013 Culture Capital of Europe. The black thing is this two theater, move that stuff, I don't know. Yeah. The two new theater that have been built on the roof of La Friche, not this one, 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 this one, not this one, not this one, this one. Yes, this one. So this is inside. This is inside, but we shall go back to the first picture after. It's just to look how it is inside. So we have built these two theater, really like theater, like here, places. They are made for it, and so this is on the roof, and it has been inaugurated 2 months ago. Can we go back to the general picture?
That was where we were just the one you were just
Again, yes, this one. So that's the black box. And then on the big white thing is this incredible thing that is, we call it Le Panorama, and this is a contemporary art exhibition, but it's a big cubic space. It is supposed to be contemporary art, but you can use it for different things. Then the two small buildings are some offices. My office is there, near the car, the white car. And then this other blocks with colored blocks, they are also offices, but this is also the place where we have the incubator for micro businesses cultural micro-businesses. And then the old building in the back, behind the big white square thing, the windows you can see, this is the 19th century part, and it has been completely renovated, and this is where they have all these multimedia startups and multimedia organization. There is a street behind it. And then behind the roof, the red roof you can see, we don't see it, and there is another building from the 19th century, and this is the heritage place.
It's a what, sorry? It's a
Heritage place, where you have all the heritage. So, yeah, that's the place. Today there are about 70 different organizations, independent. It's not like one organization with different departments. Everybody's independent. Everybody's looking for its money and for its program. And there is a central organization that you have to see more like a facilitator and a moderator and a tool for co-production between these different structures. 70 structures is about 350 people working there every day. Yeah, please.
And who is financing that? The 350 people, how are they being paid?
Everybody is looking for his own money. So most of them have subventions either from the city or from the region or from the sub-regional level. But it could change. Some are very skilled to catch European money, for example. Some are not. Some are working with public money that is not coming from culture. Like, for example, the micro-businesses incubator that I'm running, the money is not coming so much from culture, but coming from the Department of Employment of the region or the Department of Employment of the city, which is very interesting because we had to create new alliances with other types of civil servants. And at the beginning, they would say, oh, but we are not in culture. Our culture colleagues are over there. And we said, no, we want to talk to you. And it was difficult at the beginning. But now, I have to say that in some cases, it is easier to speak with the civil servants in charge of development or urban planning or employment than to speak with the civil servants in charge of culture. Because we are in France. France has a very, sorry to say so, it was relevant at some point, but today it's very old-fashioned culture policy, and these guys don't really understand what's happening here. They just understand when it is a theater or when it is an exhibition hall or where it is a concert hall. But if you begin to speak about incubators, multimedia startup and things like that, they don't have, even if they understand it, they don't have the programs which fit with. So they are embarrassed. They don't know really what to do. And it's easier in some cases to speak with non-cultural people, and they are more enthusiastic actually because it's new for them. It's something is like fresh and going on, and it's helping them to find solutions. So it's better this way. Yeah.
I have just a question. The size, you said it in hectare. Do you know the size in meters?
Yes, it's if I am not from the hard sciences, so but I'm sure some of you are.
Well, how many hectares?
12 hectares should be 120,000 square meters.
Oops.
It's big.
Yes, and it's a good inspiration for the bus garage.
Yeah.
I think to pick up some ideas.
To come back to Marseille, this place was not a part of any rehabilitation programs. All the rehabilitation programs were just on the side of this area, one in the north, one in the center, but it was not in. So Jean Nouvel did also this very important work to convince the Euro-Méditerranée program, which is the second biggest public renovation program in France after La Défense in Paris, with a lot of money. It's a public establishment, it's a public initiative, but it was not involving La Friche, but it was just near it. And Jean had a very strong talks with all these people, and finally they accepted to include this perimeter inside the larger perimeter of Euro-Méditerranée, which was very interesting because it made us eligible to some European programs. It made us, it protected us to, I would say, private housing buildings. The private promoters in housing building couldn't interfere in this. And it gave us some kind of official existence, you know. So we became a part of it, and this perimeter just stopped there. It includes La Friche, and then it stops. So Jean did also that, and it was a very useful thing. Then he left, and then we had also money trouble because the thing was growing. And as I said before, the project was not fitting the regular programs, and we were very short on money as the central organization is concerned, and we really had serious problem. So we decided to change the system. The system was based on a non-profit organization, like in most cultural activities in France. We decided to change it to a Société Coopérative d'Intérêt Collectif. This is a cooperative company, but this is a company. It's a private company. And we decided, we spoke with the city hall, and which became the landowner of all the place already a few years ago, before. And we said we want to have a private contract with the city and on a negotiation base. And the city, to our own surprise, gave us a contract for 37 years, 2 years ago. So we were very happy. But, of course, there are conditions. We have to reach a certain rate of self-financing. If we do not reach this rate, which is a bit complicated, it's changing along the years, but there is a self-financement plan that we have to follow. If we don't follow it, the contract for the 37 years might fall. So we have this huge pressure that we have to find money, plus the fact that we had this poisoned gift from 2013 Culture Capital. They built these buildings I was talking to you, but they don't give any solutions for the 1st of January 2014 to run the place. And we don't have no budget to open this. And such a place, when you open it in the morning, just to open it, you know, put the ward, put the electricity, it costs a lot of money. And we don't have no money for these places on the 1st of January 2014. So we need absolutely to find systems to make money. And when I'm talking about making money, I'm not talking about 100,000 euros. I'm talking about millions of euros. And this is complex. And the idea is to use that land, because there are some leftovers of the land around here, you don't see them on the picture, to eventually create some kind of joint operation with urban development, like housing, why not? But certain specific housing systems, not like the usual or ordinary thing. Private companies, restaurants, really go much further in the Anglo-Saxon way, which is not very usual in France, because normally in such a place you should have only, for the French tradition, you would have only artists and cultural activists. The other thing that this experience brought to me was, how I can say that, the reverse of the flux. We are in this, it's also very interesting historically speaking. The Ministry of Culture in France was created in 61 or 61. Before that, there was no Ministry of Culture. There was a Délégation des Beaux-Arts, Delegation of Fine Arts, at the Ministry of Education. And art and culture would have some kind of role to play in the general education plan. In 60s, General de Gaulle decided to create the Ministry of Culture. Everybody says it's André Malraux. Of course, André Malraux is the father of the Ministry of Culture, but if General de Gaulle, who was a true boss, I mean, you would know he was the boss, decided to give the green light, it was not because he loved the artists. he was a soldier. It is because, strategically speaking, on a global issue, he had understood, because France was losing its colonies, because France was not going in the Marshall Plan, de Gaulle wanted to get off the Marshall Plan and off the NATO, France was disappearing from the radar. And he thought it was a very good idea, and I think it was a very good idea, to invest massively in culture to make France still visible. So they decided to create the Ministry of Culture, and they decided to not create because it was already existing, but to really boost very much all the cultural and artistic action of France abroad. This is why we have the biggest institutional culture network abroad. This is very large. It's coming from that time. But it meant at that time that culture was a part of the strategic planning, and therefore was what we call, I forgot the name in French, so even in English, it was belonging to the very close circle of the government. So the policy, the culture policy, would be addicted from the center, a very centralized country, and would, filter down to the province and the peasants and the farmers. And it is still like that. So you had a policy that was based on the fact that they knew what would be good for you. They knew what was beautiful and what was not. They would have a couple of experts in theater, music, dance, etc., fine arts, to tell you what is beautiful and what is not, which artists to invest on, which not. They would be the experts. And it was really descending down to the countryside, and normally cultural equipments were considered as receptacles, consummation terminals for products that have been decided up there. And it has been working like that for the past decades. The fact that, for example, the Treaty of Lisbon, you might like it or not, is not a problem, but Treaty of Lisbon says local authorities should be attractive, creative, and in competition. And I don't know no mayor or no president of region that would say, I don't care if my region is not considered creative. They all want to be the most creative and the most attractive places in the world. This reverses the flux, because they cannot do that without supporting their own creative forces locally. We are in a place in France where we have the biggest number of festivals during the summer. We understood already a few decades ago, that it is not always an asset. If you have 150 music festival in July and August and nothing in the rest of the year, it's not only an asset. All these things went in the direction that at some point local authorities say, we have to reverse the game, especially because they pay for it, because of France, because of the crisis, the part of the public investment on culture coming from the government is much, much less than the part of public investment in culture coming from local authorities. We speak about 70% or even more of public investment in culture coming from local authorities. So they have their say. They can say, we bring the money, but we want this, we want that, and we want to be attractive and creative, etc. So they reverse completely the flux. And now from top-down situation, we go to a bottom-up situation. And this is why La Friche becomes an interesting asset for local politicians, whether they are from the right or from the left, because they invest in the knowledge industry, see? Especially because we have no petrol, the heavy industry is over. You know this, I'm sure they say the same things here, and they say the same things in Glasgow and everywhere. They need to invest in the knowledge industry, and they need such places to do that. What is also interesting in terms of politics is that when you do that, you begin to address the European projects, because the European project is not yet defined. They make a confusion between local industries, local cultural industries, and global cultural industries. In the European programs or at the Commission, for them it's cultural industries or creative industries. They put everybody in the same basket, which is not the reality. The reality is that the main threat to local creative industries are global creative industries, and if you are coherent at the European level, you have to have an articulated policy between the bigger and the smaller and make everybody, a win-win situation, which is not the case. And they still have this fantasy that creativity in Europe will be dealt in golden triangles. I'll give you an example, this Amsterdam, London, Paris, in which you have a big concentration of decision-making, very top-level art institutions, medias, top-level artists, everybody's there. And of course, it is acting as a magnet for young creative people from our peripheries, because they all want to go there, which if I were their age, I would do the same. The problem is that local authorities have invested in education, they are investing in redevelopment, they are investing in recreating a platform visible for the rest of the world, and if they lose all their creative forces, because these creative forces are going in the golden triangle, they lose the game. So they have to fix these people there. Yeah. Europe is not really dealing with this. You can use regional funds, you can use this kind of things too, but it's not clearly announced. Maybe in the new program, Creative Europe, but even I'm not completely sure that we are talking about the same thing. Nevertheless, there is this tension between the growing power of local authorities, the decreasing power of governments, and this kind of, high-level caste that is ruling the things from Brussels and don't really understand what's going on over there. And we have also a political role to play in this game very strongly, I think, from this type of places. It is also touching philosophy and politics, because I'm also working very much on this side of the things. Europe, as such, and most of the countries which compose Europe have signed, for example, the 2005 Convention on Cultural Diversity. They are supposed to respect. This is a treaty. I mean, it's not a declaration of intention. It's an international treaty. I'm working for that at UNESCO. I'm in charge of the expert panel for the International Fund for Cultural Diversity. This is a rule. They have signed it. See? And you have, it's exactly online with, for example, Article 1 of the Human Rights Declaration. Everybody knows it. I mean, you know it. It's very simple. Every human beings are equal in dignity and in rights. The word dignity being written even before the word rights. And what is it to be equal in dignity? It means there is no dominant culture. This is as simple as that. So, in this perspective, we locally don't want dominant culture, and we don't want to be dominant culture for others, so we have to organize our policies on that base. And we want to be respected on that base. And the project of the Golden Triangles is not respecting this idea of non-dominant culture. The last time I was in Brussels for a meeting at the DGEAC, they were inventing this new word, which I found it was like an alarm in my brain. They said, oh, we have to work on the defragmentation. I said, what are you talking about, defragmentation? It means small is ugly, big is visible. So we stop funding small things, small local development stuff. We want big action. Yeah. And that's what we want to fund, because we want to be in the newspapers and visible, and we stop with what we say in France, saupoudrage, and we want to make the big things. Problem is that they have done that before, and it was not very well. You can consider it a success. I mean, the biggest success for Europe in terms of culture policy, common culture policy, is the Eurovision contest, which I know you are all fond of, and it's a success. It's a popular success, you know, and,
Yes.
and culture capitals. Yeah.
We have a question from the
Yes,
audience,
please.
and I think that we are soon gonna start to wrap it up.
Oh my God.
Yes,
Sorry.
we've been speaking for almost
You have
an
your
hour.
palms. I think no. You need palms because the water is going. No?
Yes.
Okay.
Please introduce yourself, name, and where you come from.
I don't see you very well.
Hello.
Okay.
My name is Eva Vaska. I'm an architect and
Hi.
work on a private firm and
Okay.
do some teaching. I was wondering, it's just a thought that crossed my mind. Couldn't culture and all this kind of cultural life learn a bit from football?
I don't hear you very well. I'm sorry.
I was wondering if culture could learn from football, because football isn't my favorite issue, but I'm kind of watching it from the side and see how they build it with kids. The parents get really involved in it.
Yeah.
You have all the scale, and it's really kind of a community thing, but it's also a worldwide thing that you can make money out of. Could
Yeah.
there be a kind of lesson for culture to learn?
Sport is very important because, but it's the same problematic than with culture. We are not talking about entertainment, right? We are talking about practices. In my suburbs, sport is so important. You cannot bypass it. But it is important because kids play. It's not because they are stuck in front of the TV. That is entertainment. It's not because they go to the match. Of course they want to go to the match and they are right to go to the match. But they practice. That is very important. There is this huge confusion, which is of course maintained by this huge, big, entertainment industry. There is this huge confusion between entertainment and culture. It's not exactly the same thing. I'm not against entertainment. I entertain myself from time to time, but this is not the job we do. This is why we are so interested in this place to work on the idea of a day activity and night activity, which are not exactly the same. So football is like that. We were planning to have a sport platform on that area because we think it's a very good idea to have kids playing football, then going to the rehearsal studio and hip-hop, and then, mix things, because in their life it's like that. But when you say it makes money, it depends for whom, because it makes money, but the money, where is the money going? And also it costs a lot of money, because if you look at the practice level, this is where public money is spent, and it's a lot of money. I'm okay with that, but you cannot say that it makes money and doesn't cost that much. This is not true. It depends. If you look at the entertainment level, it makes money for the big entertainment companies, which actually are more or less the same than the ones that are in the entertainment industry. But if you look at the practice level, this costs money to the community because it is not funded. I find outrageous that this huge Yeah, this is the plan. This is the plan. The problem is that this huge entertainment industry let the public money, the taxpayers, pay for research and development in the arts and in the sport. And when there is a good guy, a future champion in the arts or in the sport, who is rising his head, then when they know they can begin to make money out of it, then they take it and they invest and they take the benefit. But they hardly invest. There are very few companies. It's just a minor investment. They don't really take risks, and I don't like it. If you make money, you have to invest in research and development. This is what they do in medicine. This is what they do in transportation. Why they shouldn't do it with culture or sport? The danger, the other what we have what is difficult is not the association of sport and culture. The difficult thing we have in Marseille and in the south especially is the association between tourism and culture, which is the deviating, it could be deviating, and the political statement there is not clear. The deputy president of the region is in charge of culture and tourism. So his staff are people working partly for culture, partly for tourism. I don't have to tell you who are the most powerful ones, and they rule the other ones. So at the end of the day, culture is completely instrumentalized in order to make tourism a success. The president of the Association of Marseille 2013, Culture Capital of Europe, the president of this association is the president of the Chamber of Commerce, Monsieur Thierry Pfister, and his first declaration when we started the year was in Lille 2004, they were culture capital, this city in North France. They have made 30,000 nights of hotel. We're going to make 50,000. That was his first declaration. You see? And there is always, why this is happening? Because cultural policy is not there, or because it is obsolete, it's too old, and because it's not a part of the debate. In my own party, the big bosses are not interested in culture. See, I'm on the Green Party. They are working on biodiversity. I try to tell them biodiversity and cultural diversity are the two faces of the same coin. They laugh. They don't find it relevant. They don't believe it. So we have a big lack of cultural policies, but not as organizing the sector, the professionals. This is not what I mean. But the place of culture in a coherent and integrated development policy is not there, and it should be. It should be a strong part of the coherent local development policy. It cannot be put aside. Otherwise, you arrive to this kind of tensions, and you lose money, you lose energy and money. And the young people, the young generations are very much expecting something coherent on that. And if you work on international cooperation, which I also do from time to time, you see that the issue is the same in Africa, the issue is the same in any big city all over the place. They have to integrate some kind of culture policy inside the global policy, including, of course, urban planning or urban renovation. It's already over? Okay.
Okay.
I'm very talkative. We could stay here for two.
We can continue to talk at the after mingle. I wonder if there is anybody that has a final question that wants to take that public with Mr. Ferdinand Richard. Otherwise, no? Yes? No. Okay. Then I would like to ask a final question, but the answer has to be short.
It's just impossible. I can try.
No, I've been thinking about the start of this La Friche de la Belle-de-Mai.
Just get down, just to show the other picture.
Yeah, you can just press there.
Okay.
And there. I wonder, it seems like you were a group of very active and passionate people who also got the famous architect as a leader. Is that a necessity, that it is a group of people that wants to do something for something to happen, or is it enough if the officials, the Department of Culture or City Department, make space, open up the bus garage, for example, in Marseille, and hope that it's going to be like this or in any other way? How much is that of a value, and how did you manage after the architect left? Short answer.
Yeah. I think in all these public interest initiatives, you need a political force, and either it could be inside institution or outside institution, but you need a group of people to represent this political force and political will. If you don't have that, with all the respect I have to technicians, they cannot run the thing just from the technical base. They need a goal and they need a political force. This happens or not. You can have places in Europe, I know a few places, I'm not going to tell their name, which are beautiful, with very interesting programs, but they are dead places because they don't have that, I don't know how to call it, political force to some extent. And this is something you cannot invent. It is happening or it is not happening. You can push things in order that it will happen, but you cannot really name and say, okay, you will be part of the political force. Now, run the place. It's not existing like that. You need to have a project. You need to have a dream, a fantasy. We had a fantasy. It is not at all. Of course, I'm presenting things. It looks like brilliant and gold and things like. It's much more complicated, and we had so many failures, and it's difficult, and we don't know what we're going to do in 2014. But at least there is a group of people there that have a concept of this thing. This is the last picture. This is the roof of La Friche. You know, it's large as a football ground, and it's dominating Marseille. You see, this is the sea in the back, and my house is there.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ferdinand Richard. Please, a round of applause.